The massive alien ship appeared over New York without warning. It hung in the sky like a silver teardrop, its surface gleaming under Earth's sun. Within hours, every military base worldwide went on high alert, and social media exploded with pictures and videos of humanity's first contact. Commander James Miller stood in the United Nations Assembly Hall, adjusting his uniform for the 10th time. As Earth's chosen military representative, he felt the weight of humanity on his shoulders. Around him, delegates from every nation whispered among themselves, their nervous energy filling the room. The doors opened silently. 3 tall figures walked in, their movements graceful and controlled. The aliens had blue-tinted skin that seemed to shimmer under the lights. Their formal robes, decorated with strange symbols, swept the floor as they walked. The middle one, clearly their leader, carried what looked like a staff made of pure light. "Greetings, people of Earth," the leader spoke through a translator device. "We are representatives of the Galactic Council, a federation of over 300 advanced species. We have come to evaluate your civilization for potential membership." Miller watched as the UN Secretary General stepped forward to welcome them. The usual diplomatic pleasantries were exchanged, but Miller's attention was drawn to the way the aliens kept glancing at his sidearm with what seemed like amusement. Finally, one of the aliens couldn't contain himself. "Excuse me," he said, pointing at Miller's pistol, "but do you humans still use chemical propellant weapons?" Miller straightened his back. "Yes, we do. Our armed forces primarily use kinetic energy weapons, from handguns to artillery." The aliens exchanged looks that could only be described as barely suppressed laughter. The leader, who introduced himself as High Ambassador Vale, shook his head. "How quaint. Most species abandon such primitive tools within their first century of powered flight." "Our weapons are highly effective," Miller replied, keeping his voice level. "They've served us well." "Served you well?" The third alien spoke up. "Against what?" "Other humans with equally primitive weapons. The galaxy uses energy weapons, shield technology, and plasma-based defense systems. Your bullets would be useless against even basic personal shields." The UN assembly grew quiet. Miller could feel hundreds of eyes on him, human and alien alike. "With all due respect," he said, "effectiveness isn't always about technological advancement. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one." High Ambassador Vale raised his hand, silencing further discussion. "We have come across many young species who cling to their old ways. It is natural. But if Earth wishes to join the Council, you must advance beyond such outdated technology. We cannot have member worlds relying on explosions and metal projectiles for defense." Miller wanted to argue further, but the Secretary General shot him a warning look. This was a diplomatic meeting, not a military debate. He bit his tongue and watched as the discussion moved on to other topics. As the meeting continued, Miller noticed one of the alien aides using some sort of device to scan various objects in the room. When it was pointed at his pistol, the device made an odd chirping sound, and the aide shook his head dismissively. The rest of the meeting focused on trade possibilities, cultural exchange programs, and the basic requirements for council membership. But Miller couldn't shake the feeling that something was being missed. The aliens' dismissal of human military technology seemed too quick, too absolute. When the meeting ended, High Ambassador Vale approached Miller privately. "Commander, I hope we didn't offend you earlier. It's just that we've seen countless civilizations go through this phase. Trust me, once you experience the power of energy weapons, you'll wonder why you ever relied on such primitive tools." Miller smiled politely but said nothing. 20 years of military experience had taught him that overconfidence was often the first step toward defeat. As he watched the aliens leave, he couldn't help but wonder if their technological superiority had made them blind to simpler, yet effective solutions. Little did anyone know, humanity would soon have a chance to prove the true worth of their primitive weapons, and the galaxy would never be the same. 2 weeks after the first contact, Commander Miller stood at the Edwards Air Force Base testing range, watching as alien experts examined Earth's military equipment. The Council had sent their top military advisors to evaluate humanity's defensive capabilities, but their attitudes were making his job difficult. "This is what you call advanced artillery?" asked General Dax, the lead military advisor. He stood before an M777 howitzer, his face showing the same amused expression Miller had grown tired of seeing. The general's silver uniform gleamed under the desert sun, making him look more like a mirror than a soldier. "It's proven highly effective in various combat situations," Miller explained, keeping his voice professional. Behind him, a team of human artillery crew stood at attention, trying not to show their annoyance at the aliens' constant smirking. "Watch this," Miller ordered. The crew sprang into action, loading the howitzer with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, the massive gun roared to life, sending a shell flying toward a target several miles away. The explosion kicked up a cloud of desert sand visible even from their position. General Dax yawned. "Impressive speed of operation, I'll grant you that. But observe." He pulled out what looked like a small rod from his belt. With a casual flick, a beam of energy shot out, vaporizing a similar target instantly. No reloading, no projectile drop, no travel time. Miller nodded patiently. Energy weapons certainly have their advantages. But what happens when you face an enemy with energy shields? That's precisely why energy weapons are superior. Another alien advisor, technical expert Wren, chimed in. She pulled up a holographic display showing various weapon schematics. "Our shields and weapons operate on the same principles. We can modulate energy outputs to penetrate enemy defenses. It's a complex dance of technology." The demonstration continued throughout the day. The aliens examined everything from basic rifles to advanced tank platforms. Each time, their response was the same: dismissive amusement followed by demonstrations of their own superior technology. During the lunch break, Miller sat with his second-in-command, Captain Turner, watching the aliens huddle around their scanning devices. "They haven't even tried to understand why we stick with kinetic weapons," Turner whispered, biting into his sandwich. "It's like they've completely forgotten the basics of physics." Miller nodded thoughtfully. "Notice how they keep comparing everything to their own technology. They're not really evaluating our weapons. They're just looking for their own standards in our equipment." The afternoon session focused on Earth's most advanced weapons. The aliens showed particular interest in railgun prototypes, though not for the reasons Miller expected. "At least you're trying to move in the right direction," General Dax said, examining a railgun mounting. "Though your implementation is primitive. We abandoned magnetic acceleration weapons thousands of years ago." "Why did you abandon them?" Miller asked, genuinely curious. "Energy weapons proved more efficient," Wren answered quickly. Too quickly, Miller thought. "No need for physical projectiles, no ammunition logistics, no mechanical wear and tear." As the day drew to a close, the alien delegation prepared their assessment report. Miller caught glimpses of their discussions, watching as they gestured at their holographic displays with increasingly dramatic movements. Finally, General Dax approached Miller with the official evaluation. "Commander, while we appreciate Earth's military tradition, we must be frank. Your defensive capabilities are at least 3 centuries behind Council standards. We recommend immediate adoption of basic energy weapon systems if Earth hopes to participate in galactic defense." Miller accepted the report with a polite nod, but something in General Dax's eyes caught his attention. Behind the condescension was that a flicker of uncertainty. That evening, after the aliens had left, Miller sat in his office reviewing footage from the day's demonstrations. He focused on one particular moment, when a standard rifle round had been fired near their scanning equipment. The aliens had quickly turned off their devices, claiming they needed recalibration. "They're missing something," he muttered to himself. "Or maybe they're afraid of something they don't understand." Little did the Council know, their assessment would soon be put to the test in ways none of them expected. The galaxy was about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating primitive technology. The demonstration facility on Mars' largest moon, Phobos, was impressive. Commander Miller had to admit that much as he stood in the observation room, watching Council technicians make final adjustments to their testing equipment. After weeks of debate, the Council had finally agreed to a practical demonstration of both weapon systems. The testing parameters are simple. General Dax announced to the gathered crowd of human and alien observers. We will test both weapon types against standard Council defense shields. This will prove, once and for all, the superiority of energy-based weapons. Miller noticed how the alien general emphasized the word superiority, while glancing at the rack of human weapons. On display were an assault rifle, a heavy machine gun, and a small artillery piece, all chosen specifically for this demonstration. We will begin with our weapons, technical expert Wren declared. She stepped forward, holding what looked like an elegant rifle made of crystal and silver. The target area lit up, and a shimming blue energy shield appeared 50 meters away. The alien weapon hummed to life. A brilliant beam of energy shot forth, only to splash harmlessly against the shield. Wren adjusted some settings and fired again. This time, the beam partially penetrated before being absorbed. As you can see, she explained, with proper calibration, energy weapons can be tuned to bypass enemy shields. This is the cornerstone of modern galactic warfare. Miller stepped forward. May we test our weapons now? General Dax nodded, clearly expecting another chance to mock human technology. Please do. The shield is at full strength. Miller picked up the standard assault rifle first. The familiar weight felt reassuring in his hands. He took aim at the shield, ignored the quiet chuckles from the alien observers, and squeezed the trigger. The sound of gunfire echoed through the chamber. The bullet struck the energy shield and passed straight through it, hitting the target behind with devastating effect. Complete silence fell over the room. That must be a malfunction, Wren stuttered, rushing to check her instruments. The shield was at full power. Miller fired again, and again. Each bullet passed through the energy shield as if it wasn't even there, leaving perfect holes in the target behind. Try the maximum shield strength, General Dax ordered, his previously smug expression replaced with shock. The shield changed color, humming with even more power. Miller nodded to his team, and they wheeled forward the heavy machine gun. The weapon roared to life, sending a stream of bullets downrange. Every single one passed through the shield, shredding the reinforced target behind it. Impossible, one of the alien observers shouted. Our shields are designed to stop any energy weapon in the galaxy. That's exactly the point, Miller said calmly. Your shields are designed to stop energy weapons. But our bullets, they're just pieces of metal moving really fast. There's no energy signature to stop. The artillery piece was next. When it fired, the shell not only penetrated the shield but completely destroyed the entire target array. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as pieces of their impenetrable defense system rained down across the testing range. General Dax's face had turned a pale shade of blue. This changes everything we thought we knew about defensive capabilities. Not really, Miller replied. It just proves that sometimes the old ways are still effective. Your civilization became so focused on energy weapons that you forgot about basic kinetic impact. The demonstration continued for another hour, with the aliens desperately trying different shield configurations. Nothing they did could stop the simple human bullets. Each impact drove home the same point. Their advanced technology had a critical weakness. As the observers filed out of the facility, Miller overheard snippets of worried conversations in various alien languages. The council representatives were already discussing emergency meetings and defense reviews. Commander, General Dax approached him as they prepared to leave. The aliens' earlier condescension was gone, replaced by genuine respect. It seems we owe humanity an apology, and perhaps a discussion about joint weapons development. Miller smiled. We'd be happy to help. After all, The best defense combines both old and new technologies. As his ship departed Phobos, Miller couldn't help but think about how the galaxy's balance of power had just shifted. Sometimes, he reflected, the simplest solutions were still the best ones. 3 months after the weapons demonstration on Phobos, Commander Miller sat in an emergency council meeting. The massive chamber, usually filled with peaceful diplomatic discussions, now buzzed with fear and tension. "Another colony has fallen," announced Council Leader Vale, his usual calm demeanor shattered. The holographic display in the center of the room showed a planet turning red, joining dozens of others. "The Raiders have taken control of the Centauri trading routes." Miller watched as the alien representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Raiders had appeared seemingly out of nowhere 2 weeks ago, their ships protected by shields unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. "Show us the latest battle footage," General Dax requested, his voice grim. The hologram changed to show a space battle. Council ships fired their energy weapons at the Raider vessels, but their shots dissipated harmlessly against purple-tinted shields. "Our weapons are useless," a representative from the Ta sector shouted. "They've somehow developed shields that adapt to every energy frequency we use." Miller leaned forward, studying the footage carefully. "Those ships," he said, drawing everyone's attention. "What are they made of?" Technical expert Wren, who had been analyzing the data, looked up from her screens. "Standard metal alloys, nothing special. Their only exceptional feature is their shield technology. And that's what makes them so dangerous," Vale added. "They've found a way to make their shields resist all known energy weapons. Even our most powerful ships can't." "But what about physical weapons?" Miller interrupted. The chamber fell silent. "Has anyone tried using kinetic weapons against them?" The aliens looked at each other uncomfortably. After the demonstration on Phobos, several Council worlds had begun researching kinetic weapons, but none had yet developed working models. "We don't have any ships equipped with such weapons," General Dax admitted. "Our entire fleet is built around energy weapon systems." The hologram showed another battle. This time, a Raider ship approached a defended world. The planet's orbital defense stations fired everything they had, but the Raiders simply pushed through the barrage of energy weapons. Their return fire destroyed the stations one by one. 7 worlds lost in 2 weeks, Vale said heavily. Millions of citizens displaced or captured. If we can't find a way to penetrate their shields soon. Miller stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Earth can help. All eyes turned to him. "We have shipyards. We have the technology to build kinetic weapons. We may not have space warfare experience, but we know how to make things that can punch through shields." "You want us to arm our ships with human weapons?" asked a council member, sounding skeptical despite everything that had happened. "No," Miller replied. "I want us to work together. Combine your advanced ship designs with our weapon systems. Create something the Raiders won't expect." The chamber erupted in discussion. Some representatives argued it was too risky to rely on primitive technology. Others pointed out they had no choice. Their current weapons were proving worthless against the Raiders. General Dax raised his hand for silence. "Commander Miller's suggestion has merit. We've seen what human weapons can do to our own shields. The Raiders' shields, while more advanced, work on similar principles." "How long would it take?" Vale asked. Miller thought for a moment. "To modify existing ships and produce new weapons, with full cooperation between Earth's factories and Council technology. Maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks, someone shouted. "We could lose 10 more worlds in that time." "Then we better get started now," Miller replied firmly, "unless anyone has a better idea." The silence that followed was answer enough. Council Leader Vale stood up, his robes shimmering in the holographic light. "We will put it to a vote. All in favor of accepting Earth's assistance in this crisis." Hands and tentacles rose across the chamber. Even the most skeptical council members couldn't deny they needed help. As the meeting adjourned, General Dax approached Miller. "I never thought I'd say this, Commander, but the galaxy's best hope might lie in those primitive weapons of yours. Miller nodded solemnly. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Now let's see what happens when we combine them with your new ones. The next 2 weeks would prove crucial for the galaxy's survival, and humanity's outdated technology was about to take center stage in the biggest conflict the Council had ever faced. Earth's largest weapons factory hummed with activity. Commander Miller walked through the massive assembly line, watching as human workers and alien engineers worked side by side. The sight of Council technicians studying human manufacturing processes would have been unthinkable just months ago. These modifications are remarkable, technical expert Wren said, examining a newly designed ship-mounted railgun. She had been assigned to oversee the integration of human weapons with Council technology. We're achieving much higher muzzle velocities than I thought possible. Miller nodded, checking the production schedules on his tablet. Combining your power systems with our projectile designs has worked better than expected. How are the ammunition factories keeping up? Production is at maximum capacity, a factory supervisor reported, walking up to them. All 3 continents are running 24-hour shifts. We've already armed 50 Council ships with the new weapons. The factory floor stretched for miles, filled with the sounds of machinery and welding. Massive rail guns and coil guns were being assembled alongside more traditional weapons modified for space combat. Each weapon was designed to punch through the raiders' supposedly impenetrable shields. General Dax appeared from behind a row of artillery pieces. Commander, we've received news from the front. The raiders have taken another system, but they're moving slower now. They seem confused by our sudden withdrawal from several sectors. Good, Miller replied. They don't know what's coming. Are the modified ships in position? Almost. We've hidden them in the nebula near their expected path. But Miller, Dax paused, looking troubled. Some of my officers are still skeptical. They've trained their entire lives with energy weapons. These new hybrid weapons feel strange to them. Miller understood their concern. The new weapons combined Council power systems and targeting technology with human projectile designs. They looked unlike anything either civilization had used before. Have them run more simulations, Miller suggested. They need to understand that in space, kinetic weapons are even more effective than in atmosphere. No air resistance, and the velocities we're achieving. He whistled softly. Wren pulled up a holographic display showing the latest test results. The math is undeniable. At these speeds, even a small projectile carries enough energy to devastate a capital ship, and since they're physical objects, the raiders' shields won't know what hit them. The supervisor finished with a grin. A loud alarm suddenly echoed through the factory. Miller quickly checked his communicator. That's the signal. The first wave of modified ships is ready for deployment. They hurried to the factory's command center. The large screen showed Council ships across the galaxy, each dot representing a vessel newly armed with human weapons. Nearly 300 ships have been modified in just 2 weeks. It's not enough, Dax said quietly. We needed more time. It will have to be enough, Miller replied. The raiders don't know we've changed our weapons. That surprise is worth 1,000 ships. Wren was studying the tactical display. Look at their pattern, she said, pointing to the raiders' movements. They're getting overconfident. Each victory makes them bolder. Pride comes before a fall, Miller quoted. They think their shields make them invincible, just like the Council thought energy weapons were the only answer. The room fell quiet as reports came in from across the galaxy. Council worlds were preparing for the largest coordinated military action in their history. Every modified ship had to play its part perfectly. The crews are ready, Dax announced. They've run the simulations and combat drills. As ready as they'll ever be. Miller looked around the room at the mixed group of humans and aliens. Just months ago, the Council had laughed at human weapons. Now they were betting everything on them. Send the order, he said firmly. All ships to battle stations. It's time to show the raiders that sometimes the oldest solutions are the best ones. As the commands went out, Miller couldn't help but feel proud. Humanity had gone from being mocked as primitive to becoming the galaxy's last hope. Now they just had to prove that hope wasn't misplaced. The next few days would decide the fate of hundreds of worlds, and it would all depend on whether the raiders learned the same lesson the Council had: never underestimate primitive human ingenuity. Commander Miller stood on the bridge of the Council flagship, watching the tactical display with intense focus. Around him, alien crew members worked at their stations, preparing for humanity's first major space battle. "Raider fleet detected," announced the sensor officer. 5 capital ships with escort vessels. They're heading straight for the mining colony. "Right where we want them," General Dax said quietly. He stood beside Miller, his silver uniform now decorated with a human military patch. "All ships report ready. Weapon systems are charged." The plan was simple but dangerous. They had to let the raiders get close enough to spring their trap. The modified Council ships waited silently in the dust cloud of a nearby asteroid field, their engines cold. Enemy ships entering optimal range, Wren reported from her tactical station. "They're not even in combat formation. They expect no resistance." Miller watched as the red dots representing raider ships moved closer to their position. The raiders had grown confident after weeks of easy victories. Their shields had never failed them before. "All ships, prepare to fire," Miller ordered. "Remember your training. Aim for their engines first." The bridge crew tensed as the raiders approached. Through the main viewport, Miller could see their purple shields glowing in the darkness of space. They looked impressive, but he knew what was about to happen. "Now," Miller commanded. The asteroid field erupted with weapons fire, but instead of energy beams, massive tungsten shells and railgun projectiles streaked across space. The raiders had no time to react. The first salvo struck their lead ship. The kinetic rounds punched straight through their shields as if they weren't even there. Secondary explosions blossomed across the raider vessel's hull. "Direct hits," Wren shouted, excitement in her voice. "Their shields are useless against our weapons." The raiders tried to return fire, their energy weapons flashing. But the Council ships were already moving, using tactics developed by human naval strategists. Their modified engines, another product of human-alien cooperation, gave them mobility the raiders hadn't expected. "Second wave, fire at will," General Dax ordered. More projectiles filled space, each one ignoring the raiders' supposedly impenetrable defenses. A second raider ship lost its engine section, spinning out of control. "They're trying to retreat," the sensor officer reported. "Their formation is breaking up." Miller leaned forward. "Not this time. Launch the fighters." Small Council ships swarmed out of the asteroid field. Each was equipped with scaled-down versions of human weapons. They darted between the larger raider ships, their kinetic weapons tearing through shields and armor alike. "This is impossible," they heard over an open channel as the raiders realized their situation. "Our shields, they can't stop their weapons." The battle turned into a rout. Without their shield advantage, the raiders' tactical flaws became obvious. They had relied too heavily on their defensive technology, never developing proper combat strategies. "Enemy flagship is attempting to jump to faster than light," Wren announced. "Should we pursue?" "No," Miller replied. "Let them run. Let them tell the others what happened here." As the remaining raiders fled, cheers erupted across the bridge. Council crew members who had once doubted human weapons were now celebrating their effectiveness. "Damage report," General Dax called out, trying to maintain military discipline despite his obvious joy. "Minor damage to 3 of our ships," came the response. "No casualties." The raiders lost 3 capital ships and 7 escorts. 2 more severely damaged. Miller nodded in satisfaction. The combination of human weapons and Council technology had proved even more effective than they'd hoped. More importantly, the raiders' aura of invincibility was shattered. "Send word to all Council worlds," Dax ordered. "The raiders can be beaten. Their shields cannot stop physical weapons." As the message went out, Miller watched the tactical display update. Already, reports were coming in from other sectors where modified council ships had engaged raider forces. Everywhere, the story was the same. The raiders' unstoppable advance had been broken by primitive human weapons. Perhaps, Wren said, looking at Miller, we should stop calling them primitive weapons. Just call them effective. Miller replied with a smile. That's all that matters in the end. The battle had changed everything. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the oldest solutions were still the best ones, and that true advancement meant recognizing value in all technologies, no matter their origin. 1 month after the first major victory against the raiders, Commander Miller walked through the grand halls of the Galactic Council's central chamber. The place had changed. Display cases that once showed only energy weapons now proudly exhibited human kinetic weapons alongside them. The final raider stronghold surrendered this morning, General Dax announced to the assembled council members. Their fleet is destroyed, their leaders captured. The threat is over. Applause filled the chamber. Representatives from hundreds of worlds celebrated the victory that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. On the main display, a map showed how quickly the raiders had fallen once the combined human council forces began their counterattack. We have technical expert Wren's final report, Council Leader Vale said, standing at the podium. In total, we destroyed or captured 800 raider vessels. Our casualties were minimal thanks to the effectiveness of the new weapon systems. Miller sat quietly, remembering how these same aliens had once laughed at human technology. Now they were incorporating it into their own designs, creating something entirely new. Commander Miller, Vale called out, please step forward. Miller approached the podium, his boots echoing in the now quiet chamber. He could feel the respect in the aliens' eyes, so different from the amused looks they had given him months ago. Humanity proved itself not just through its weapons, Vale began, but through its willingness to share knowledge and work together. The raiders' shields were perfect against energy weapons, but they never considered the possibility of physical projectiles, something we had also forgotten about. Wren stepped up next, activating a holographic display. We've already begun developing new hybrid technologies. Combining council power systems with human projectile designs has opened up possibilities we never imagined. Our ships now carry both energy and kinetic weapons, making them more versatile than ever. But more importantly, General Dax added, we learned a valuable lesson about assuming technological superiority. Sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective one. The display showed images of the new ships being built in orbital shipyards around Council worlds. They looked different from traditional Council vessels, showing clear human influence in their design. Therefore, Vale announced, the Council has voted unanimously to offer Earth full membership, with a special position on the Military Advisory Board. Commander Miller, will you accept this role on behalf of your planet? Miller stepped forward. Earth would be honored. But I hope this partnership goes beyond just military matters. We have much to learn from each other. Indeed we do, Vale agreed. Already, several Council worlds have expressed interest in establishing joint research facilities with Earth. Your old technologies, combined with our advanced systems, could revolutionize many fields, not just weapons. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives talked excitedly about future possibilities. Miller noticed how the younger alien diplomats were particularly enthusiastic, already planning exchanges of knowledge and technology. Later, at a celebration in the Council's Grand Hall, Miller stood with Dax and Wren, watching aliens and humans mingling freely. You know, Wren said, holding up a glass of Earth wine, when I first scanned your weapons, I thought my instruments were malfunctioning. I couldn't believe something so simple could be so effective. That's the beauty of it, Miller replied. Sometimes we get so focused on advancing forward that we forget to look back at what works. The raiders made that mistake, Dax added. They thought their shields made them invincible, just like we thought energy weapons were the only answer. And now? Miller asked, looking around at the mixed crowd. Now we know better, Wren smiled. The future isn't about choosing between old and new technology. It's about finding the best of both. As the celebration continued, Miller thought about how far they'd come. From being laughed at as primitive to becoming equal partners in galactic society, humanity had proved its worth not through superiority, but through cooperation and innovation. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. True advancement meant keeping an open mind to all possibilities, whether they came wrapped in advanced energy fields or in simple steel and gunpowder. After all, the best solution wasn't always the most complicated one. Sometimes it just had to work. And human guns, they definitely worked.